In the world of board game media production, one man retains the integrity and tenacity to rise above the rest and compile the definitive list of the 100 best board games of all time. And that man, that legend, is Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower. And some guy named Chaz Marler's apparently made his own top 100 list. Because Tom asked him to.
No, I didn't.
Hey everyone, Chaz Marler from Pair of Dice Paradise here, and we'll continue with the list of top 100 games of all time in just a moment. But before we do, I wanted to steal away just a couple of moments because you know how much I enjoy components, and I wanted to share the set of novelty oversized dice that I got. They're so cool. There's a D6 and a D2. I want to share the dice. I want to talk about the... Fine! I'll talk about the dice later. For now, we'll continue our contractual obligation. Next item on our list is number 40. One day, long ago, during my junior year of high school, I entered our political studies class and took my seat along with everyone else. But little did I know that that day was going to be much different than the days before. After everyone had taken their seats, in walked our teacher. But instead of his usual notebook that he carried, he had in his hands this small paper sack full of a random assortment of colored half-inch poker chips. Without explaining what he was doing or why, he went around the room and had every student in the class randomly pull one poker chip out of the bag. I recall that I, along with about 4 other students in the class, pulled a blue chip out of the bag. And in addition to us, I'd say about 10 students pulled out yellow chips, 10 students pulled out red chips, and 10 more students pulled out white chips. So there we sat with our randomly selected color of poker chip. Now what? Well, then the teacher broke us up into groups based on the color of chip that we had selected. So the yellow chips went there, red chips went there, white chips went there, and my fellow blue chips and I went to a small cluster of seats at the front of the class. The only further instruction that the teacher gave for the remainder of that class period was that the students with the blue chips were now in charge of deciding what happened to all the other students' chips. So within minutes, we started enacting rules that led to the majority of the chips out there coming into our possession. And not much longer after that, my fellow blue chip holding students realized that there probably didn't need to be 5 of us in the blue chip group. And so, by simply distributing this random assortment of colored poker chips and establishing one simple rule, within 40 minutes, the entire class devolved into political chaos. And that memory set the stage as for why I instantly fell in love with game number 40 on my list, Dead Last. So in Dead Last, up to about 12 players will gather around the table, each receiving a different randomly distributed color. And the sole premise of the game is that all of the players around the table will collude together to secretly choose who among their co-players gets voted out that round. And whoever receives the most votes is out of the round. Simple as that. And if multiple players are tied for the most votes, all those players who tie are out of the round. However, if you are a player who receives the most votes or is tied for the most votes, and you actually chose your own color, saying, I knew I was going to get targeted and picked, you actually get to stay in the round and remove one of the people who voted for you. The last people standing in the round divvy up some points, and then the next round begins and play continues until someone reaches a certain threshold of points. But in essence, that is the entirety of the game. And that is why I enjoy Dead Last so much. It is this dirt simple game with a dirt simple premise and minimal rules that instantly devolves in this socio-political chaos. Every time I play it, I'm taken right back to my junior year in high school, to that day in class. And that is why Dead Last is number 40 on my top games of all time. A poignant presentation of the power of personality. All right, Whereas number 40 on my list was a game that plays up to 12, number 39 on my list is a game only for 2. In Patchwork, you and your opponent are both building quilts. To do so, you'll be choosing from a random assortment of different fabric pieces, almost shaped like Tetris pieces, around the table. And as you go along picking these pieces, you'll be putting them into your quilt, trying, just like Tetris, to have as much unused space as possible as you fit these pieces of fabric together. This is a game that I admittedly let the theme prevent me from playing for a while, but once I sat down to play it, whim zang boom, which is a thing I say now, I was hooked on Patchwork. It is a fantastically elegant game design and one that I highly, highly recommend. That's Patchwork, number 39. Whim bang zoo! Now, I've mentioned before that I dig me a game that uses dice in unique and different ways. And number 38 on my list is a game that I love for just that reason, even though the dice mechanic is just a part of this game's uniqueness. This game is Garden Dice. Okay, in Garden Dice, players are using this shared patch of garden space, this grid of squares, and they'll be planting seeds in this garden grid, watering those seeds, and then harvesting them. Players will have 4 dice, and they'll roll them and use them for a variety of different things. First of all, you'll use the dice to mark the coordinates where you will be planting seeds. You'll also be using the dice to obtain new seeds, and also water and harvest those seeds. So managing where you place these seeds on the board and when you choose to water and harvest them is a key component to the game. But what really makes Garden Dice cool is this mechanism that I don't know if I've seen in any other game. Each seed is numbered 1 through 6, and when you water or harvest one of your seeds or plants, it has this trickle-down mechanism, where every plant or seed that is orthogonally connected to the one that you're working with is also going to be watered or harvested. For example, if you were to water a 6, the 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s that are orthogonally adjacent to that 6 are also going to be watered. Same thing with harvesting. And not just your own plants, but your opponent's plants too. So now, in addition to managing your dice, you also have to manage the placement and timing of watering and harvesting, because everything that you do to generate points for yourself may also benefit and generate points for your opponent. I think Garden Dice is one of the most underrated games out there today, and I highly recommend giving it a try. It's number something, and it's number 38 on my list of my favorite games of all time for a reason. Now, I've mentioned before that back throughout the 90s, myself, my wife, and all of our friends were neck deep into Magic, and our gameplay of that has tapered off. We barely ever get together anymore to play games of Magic like we used to. So I've always been on the lookout for games to take Magic's place. For quite a while, Doomtown Reloaded was the LCG or ECG or CCG, whatever acronym you want to call it. It was the growing card game that I was going to invest my time and resources in. But number 37 on my list actually recently dethroned Doomtown Reloaded to become my game of choice that has cards that you collect for a while. And that game is Ashes. Now, Ashes has a lot of things going for it. First of all, it's not just a Magic the Gathering clone. It has a lot of unique mechanisms and ideas going on behind the scenes. Additionally, the graphic design and the artwork is fantastic, and it's this own little universe that is developing and growing and telling its own story. I've mentioned before that a large card pool is the lifeblood of a customizable card game, LCG, CCG, or deck builder. And even though quite a few expansions have been released for Ashes so far, I don't know if its card pool is yet at the size to really be what I want it to be. And that is to be able to do what I used to do with Magic. Get a wild hair idea for some sort of deck to make and go out and be able to pull all these different cards to pull off this idea that I had. The options for deck construction that's available in Ashes might not be varied enough yet to really keep me tantalized. For that reason, I'm not sure if Ashes is going to continue to rise up on my top 100 list or slowly diminish down. Only time and the cards that are released will tell. Periodically, I have the opportunity to go play a night of gaming with my best friend and our families. And it's fantastic. And one of the things that we have been doing is pulling out these old games that we haven't had a chance to play in decades. And one of the games that he brought a couple months ago was the classic Scotland Yard. And I hated it. Now, I don't know if the reason why my fellow Scotland Yard inspectors and I lost so badly was because of the lack of resources that the game gives to the inspectors, but the point is that we always felt like we were just grasping in the dark randomly, and there was never a sense of tension in the game. Enter Spectre Ops, a game designed by one of my favorite board game designers, Emerson Matsuuchi. And this game is a prime example of what Emerson does so beautifully. Spectre Ops is one of those hidden movement games where a team of bad guys are trying to find a lone good guy who is sneaking through their facility trying to achieve certain objectives without being found, caught, or killed, and then escaping. And each character in the game has a different power. There's a little vehicle they're driving around. There's little checkpoints that the person has to get to and get back out of these doors. And even with all of that going on, Spectre Ops' design keeps things as streamlined and elegant as possible. But being streamlined doesn't mean that this game is simple or easy. In fact, all of the players on both teams feel this anxious tension from the very first turn. Something that my other game group and I never felt with Scotland Yard. And that tension, that engagement from the very first turn as you embark on this journey into this game is why this game, Spectre Ops, ranks so high on my favorite games of all time. Now, some games like Spectre Ops will put players into the role of certain characters that they will play throughout the game. But other games reveal certain characters hidden within the players that the game will bring out. Characters and traits that the other players did not necessarily know were there. And such is the case with number 35 on my list, Survive! Escape from Atlantis. My mother-in-law is this darling 5-foot-tall preschool teacher whose favorite thing in the world is Christmas. But you put her down in front of a game of Survive Escape from Atlantis and there is no Christmas. Bing, bang, zoom, she transforms into this ruthless, cutthroat, heathen, bent not only on winning, but making sure she does it at your sole expense. To moments like that which remind me why I enjoy the board game hobby so very, very much. Seriously, she'll cut you. In Survive Escape from Atlantis, players start out on this island called Atlantis, which begins to sink and they must escape from. Boats appear, however, sharks and whales and other nasty things also appear. And players must navigate all of this, the crumbling island, the boats sailing away, the vicious creatures lurking in the sea. They must navigate their way through all of this to make their way to safety at the corners of the board. And in the game, players may even assist each other to help everyone make it to safety. And even though it appears my mother-in-law has never received that memo, Survive Escape from Atlantis still floats its way up to number 35 on my list of the best games of all time. As I was making this list, it became clearer and clearer to me that I dig games that provide just a framework of simple rules, but then let the players develop multiple strategies to try and work their way into first place. And that has never been truer than with number 34 on my list, The Game of 49. Now, at first glance, the Game of 49 comes across as nothing but a glorified game of Connect 4. But the wrinkle in this game is that each player starts with $49, and then players must use those $49 to bid on the spaces on the board that randomly come up to put their chips on. You still got to connect 4, but you never know if you're going to have to suddenly switch tactics and go start making 4 in a row over here, and if you do, Are you going to have enough money left over to actually do that? Do I sacrifice some money and actually bid on a space I don't need just to keep this guy from getting a space he does need? Do I not bid on this space to try and block that guy in the hopes that this other player will bid on that space and sacrifice his money to block that guy? It's not a fancy game, and it's certainly not a flashy game, but it is a fantastic game, and one that I highly recommend that you give a try because it really might surprise you. It surprised me and has solidified its place at number 34 on my list. Alright, as you're probably figuring out by now, I am a big fan of games that use dice in interesting ways and games that come out of nowhere and take me by surprise. And such is the case with number 33 on my list, the game of dice-wielding gladiatorial combat, Strike.
Yeah? Strike? Woohoo! Way to go!
Hey, it's fellow Strike dice game aficionado Rodney Smith. Always a pleasure to speak with you, Rodney. To what do I owe the privilege of today's visit?
Yeah, Chaz, I just wanted to let you know how excited I am to see Strike so high on your list. Speaking of which, where did Kemet land?
Well, actually, Kemet was way back at number 76.
You're dead to me, Marler.
But wait, again. Well, regardless, let's find out how Strike plays. Strike starts out with a small gladiatorial arena in the center of the table, and each player with a handful of dice. And on your turn, you'll roll these dice one at a time into the arena, and you will remove any duplicate dice, leaving any dice that don't have a match. You'll leave those unmatched dice in the arena, and the next player will take their turn rolling their dice into the arena any way they choose. They will remove all matching dice, leaving any unmatched dice, and so on and so forth. The goal to be the last player not to run out of dice. Now the dice have an X, and if you roll an X, you instantly lose that dice. So the game has a built-in countdown mechanism, and it's not going to take forever. It is a fast, fun game that I just fell in love with. Oh yeah, I said it, and I admit it. I like Strike.
Yeah, deal with it.
I likes it so much, it's number 33 on my list. Now, I can't give Strike all of the accolades for innovation in a dice game. Some of those accolades probably have to go to Pandemic: The Cure as well. Now, as with the mind-melting event that is Strike the Dice game, in Pandemic: The Cure, players are also rolling dice. However, instead of an arena, players are playing on more of a metaphorical arena, ergo, their arena is the entire world. Well, it's actually a circle of 6 discs that represent the world, but Strike is still cool. In Pandemic: The Cure, players are going to be revisiting many of the roles introduced in the original Pandemic board game, but this time the viruses are spreading around this simplified planet in dice form. Each continent in the world is represented by a different number, 1 through 6, and as players roll the specialized dice in the game, the dice that they roll will be placed on the continent with the corresponding number. But if more of 3 dice of the same color are ever present on that continent, there's an epidemic, and they spill over to the next continent. And in doing so, it's possible that the next continent has an epidemic and overflows as well. And so on and so forth, over and over and over again, every single time I've played this game. In fact, Pandemic: The Cure is one of those games that provides you one way to win, but about 47,000 different ways to lose. I have never won a game of Pandemic: The Cure. We've been close, but the game also comes back to just beat us unmerciful. But even so, I still have a very strong appetite and desire to play it again. Even in losing the game, I haven't gotten discouraged to the point where I've lost my affinity for this game. And that's why, even with the odds stacked so strongly against us, I can't wait to get it to the table again. Alright, I think that the only thing that I enjoy more than using dice in strange ways in a game is wheeling and dealing to make everyone hate me while we play. And there's no game out there that allows you to do that better, apparently, than number 31 on my list, Nothing Personal. And of course, this brings us to another one of those moments where doing this top 100 list here on this YouTube channel, in front of this audience, I must take a moment to stop and say something about my experiences I've had getting to know this game's co-designer, Stephen Avery. I first met Mr. Stephen Avery at Gen Con 2015 when I went there as part of the Dice Tower crew. Stephen Avery was my roommate. Now, I don't know what you may have heard about Mr. Avery, but I believe he has a bit of a reputation as, a loose cannon, a bad boy. And it just so happens that at that Gen Con, he was assigned to be my hotel roommate. And I have to say that getting to know him during that time period, I can absolutely attest that all of those rumors about him are absolutely true. Additionally, he is a genuinely fantastic, caring, and kind individual, and the world's best roommate at a convention, because he's never there in the hotel room. Seriously, I think I saw him twice over the course of 4 days. At one point, I slept in his bed just to see if he'd show up and notice. I got the best night's sleep ever. I ended up not even having to use my own toothbrush, and now I've definitely said too much. Sure, you may come home from the convention to find one or two of Steve's socks in your luggage somehow, but the point is that when you return it, he'll be eternally grateful for it back. And that's why it surprises me how such a fun-loving, kind man could co-design such a vicious game. In Nothing Personal, players take on the part of mob bosses who are vying for control of the local organized crime syndicate. And as everyone knows, the only way to claw your way to the top of the mob is to whack everybody that's between you and the capo position. Who will you bribe? Who will you threaten? Who will you threaten to bribe? Who will you blackmail until they accept your bribe? And who will you stab in the back so you don't have to pay them their bribe after you've blackmailed them? And this is the beautiful tapestry of treachery that Nothing Personal weaves for the players. It's a game with some solid rules and mechanisms that still leaves just enough room to negotiate everything. And if it included an arena of dice-chucking gladiatorial combat, it'd probably be in my top 10. But no game is perfect, and as it is, Nothing Personal stabs its way up my list to number 31 with a bullet. Okie doke, so there we have it. Numbers 40 through 31 on my top 100 games of all time list. That does it for this segment. Next, we'll be getting into the top 30. But in the meantime, let me tell you about these wonderful...
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and
more board
reviews
game news,
as well
reviews,
as our
and commentary, be sure
top-rated
to
audio
subscribe to both Dice Tower and
podcast
the
at
Pair of Dice Paradise YouTube channels. And
You
be
can
sure to
also
follow us
find
on
other
Facebook and
great
Twitter as
shows
well to
at
continue the conversation about all things board games.
I'm
I've been Chaz Marler.
and
Until
you've
next
been
time,
watching
thanks
The
for
Dice
watching,
Tower.
and here's the...
The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at coolstuffinc.com.
With number 40 in my list of top I want to talk about the dice. Number 40. That was expensive. And even though you can't see it on my shelves, David, dead last is right over here. So it's on here. You should count on your list.